One thing's clear. As Lil Nas X continues to blur lines between hip-hop and country, internet troll and global star, and now, heaven and hell.
I've heard you previously discuss chime with this if they do not express this exactly, that the problem of not having a shared public myth is that everything is up for grabs for being anointed with that status without a clear depiction of God as ideals, God as shared standards. Then why not just pursue fame? Why not just pursue coke if nothing means anything anyway? With regard to your sort of inquiry about the nature of sort of public life, for me, the older I get, the more I recognise it was an unsophisticated attempt, as perhaps all early grasps at the Grail must be, of trying to heal the seminal wound of seeking some kind of value, of trying to impose some kind of myth in a mythless world, some pursuit, something of value to chase after, and then increasingly discovering as various points in the journey were arrived at that it couldn't fulfill me. This constant requirement for more, and no way of healing that wound, not materially at least.
Yet again in America. And uniquely American, this happens with regularity in large numbers as a pattern just here, nowhere else.
There's truth in humor, and in this case, it's a dark truth. Consider.
Very bizarre.
It is bizarre.
To make an association with, I mean, even if it's to get attention, to associate yourself with Satan and the devil, it's a bit much.
Human blood, and it's not really my thing, and apparently not a lot of people's thing.
Right.
Very important conversation, which many avoid, because sometimes it might make one uncomfortable. You know, acts of violence have been plaguing the U.S. all in the month of March.
Turn to that breaking news overnight, another mass shooting, this one in California.
We need to warn you, it is extremely disturbing. Both attacks are being investigated.
This just the latest in a string of violent attacks. Social media video shows the man being pummeled on the subway.
But gun violence is surging across the country, with murders increasing.
If you look at cultures like Japan, that have historically some of the most violent video games and culture at their hands, you don't see this. There is something that is malignant in our culture. What it is, what causes it, you tell me.
Lil Nas is not the first artist to use religious imagery in his music to push the boundaries.
Pleased to meet you.
From the Rolling Stones in Sympathy for the Devil, to Madonna in Like a Prayer.
There's just nothing new about this at all. In fact, it's so much a common trope of rock and roll that we have to conclude that Lil Nas X knew exactly what he was doing. He was invoking this heritage.
In a way, by putting out this letter and saying that I am pushing an agenda, does that allow him to control the narrative in a way?
He's conscious of what he's doing, and he's doing it in a particular way.
I'm going to say something a little different here. I think that those elements are important. Even pop culture is important, but we're really talking about personal responsibility.
Now, each pair has a Bible verse on them about Satan's fall from heaven.
And they are dropping just days after he was seen dancing with the devil in his latest music video.
Very bizarre story here. Rapper Lil Nas X made headlines over the weekend.
They are customized Nike Air Max 97s that feature a pentagram and contain real human blood inside the soles.
A reference to the Bible passage Luke 10:18.
In a statement, Nike said, quote, "We do not have a relationship with Lil Nas X or Mischief."
Nike has a right to be like, hey, we have spent 50, 60 years getting that brand and that logo to where it is. You putting a pentagram next to it is not really what we're feeling.
Where's the blood coming from?
Like,
Blood
you
is
can't
that,
use a Nike swoosh on anything. You can't just sew that on your jacket and be like, yeah, this is Nike's. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. That's what we should be talking about.
Good versus evil.
But we're really talking about personal responsibility.
Jung pointed out, for example, he believed that the book of Revelations had been tacked onto the New Testament because the Christ in the Gospels was portrayed too much as a figure of mercy, whereas in Revelation, Christ is portrayed primarily as a judge. And Jung's explanation for that was that every ideal is a judge. And the ultimate ideal is the ultimate judge. And you could say the ultimate ideal judges your soul. And because that's virtually the definition of the ultimate ideal. And so the ultimate ideal is something transcendent and divine that judges your soul. Now, what that means about the way the universe is constituted, again, I have no idea, but the higher the ideal, the more severe the judge. That's clearly the case. And that should make you quake, I think. It does when your conscience assaults you in the middle of the night for things that you've done wrong. It's because you're quaking in your boots morally because you failed to live up to this ideal. And there's no escape from that. Not truly. I don't believe there is.
Yet again in America, we search our souls for answers, beg our leaders for solutions that thus far have not come.
And Lil Nas X's response to all of it, he says, well, there are mass shootings every single week and a pandemic, but people are discussing shoes.
The satirical website The Onion follows a ritual whenever there's a mass shooting in this country, running this headline. No way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens. There's truth and humor, and in this case, it's a dark truth.
I think the problem here is that we have an empathy problem in the U.S. I think a lot of it comes from that cancel culture where you do one thing wrong, and I think Malik touched on this. You do one thing wrong, and you are forever marred for life. You are labeled whatever that is in that one moment because we have lost empathy in this country, and that's why we cannot get along.
The third high-profile shooting in 3 weeks in this country.
Is this shocking to you? Debilitating? Unimaginable? Or is it one of those things that happens yet again in America? Sadly routine.
Get back! There have been 2,805 mass shootings since the Gun Violence Archive began compiling data in 2014, and they have become more frequent.
Oh, the pattern paused as the nation did for the pandemic, but now it picks up right where we left off. Before the lockdowns, there was a shooting spree last March in Springfield, Missouri, across 5 miles that left 4 dead. Remember that? And weeks earlier at a beer company in Milwaukee, a disgruntled worker shot and killed 5 employees and then himself. Remember the details of that one?
March 16th. 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent, killed in and near Atlanta. March 17th, 5 shot in a drive-by shooting in Stockton, California. March 18th, 8 people shot in Gresham, Oregon, and New Orleans. March 20th, 2 killed, 17 wounded in mass shootings in Philadelphia, Dallas, and Houston. Monday, 13 killed, another 5 wounded in Boulder, Colorado, Detroit, and Cleveland. Tuesday, 2 killed, 6 wounded in Aliceville, Alabama, and Atlanta. Friday, 6 killed, 25 wounded in Chicago, Memphis, Philadelphia, and Virginia Beach. Yesterday, 1 killed, 13 wounded in River Grove, Illinois, Chicago, and Yazoo City, Mississippi. All that since the spa attacks.
Don't give me this business about guns, because there are more guns in Mexico and other places than here. But the reason why they kill each other is because of drugs. We kill each other because we're having a bad day. We kill each other because we can't get a date, or we're forcibly celibate. We are a demented society. Right. That's the problem.
That's also not false, because the ideal that we're all chasing, we don't know what its ultimate reality is. You know, if you have an instinct towards further development, we don't know the limits to what that currently greater could be. And that's where the idea of mentorship, let's say, shades into something like religious worship, because I suppose if you think about the Christian world, the ultimate mentor is Christ. And you could say that being a Christian, or you could say that being a psychologist, and if you said it being a psychologist, you would say, well, it's by definition that the ultimate mentor is Christ, and what Christianity has been, as it unfolds itself over the last 2,000 years, is an attempt to engage all of the people within that belief system in a dialogue about what that ideal actually constitutes. and there's tradition that feeds into that, the biblical stories and the corpus of tradition that goes along with that. But all of it is a collective attempt to specify that ideal so that people can use it as a target to further their development. And that's not delusional.
How does this transition between an Old Testament version of God that requires of us to become good, that God itself or himself or herself is also good, how does this idea, this interpretation of our relationship with God, this Old Testament which places this sort of obligation that sort of punishes Job for his phatic impersonation of worship, how does that evolve into the Christian idea of Christ as the perfect mentor, Christ as the perfect
Why
emblem?
don't you ask a difficult question? Jesus. Well, Jung talks about this a fair bit in Answer to Job, and that's a very difficult book to summarize, and it's also a very terrifying book, but the upshot of it is essentially something like this, which is that whatever God is, the best element of him can plausibly be brought forth as a consequence of the manifestation of what's best in us. And that might be the willingness to sacrifice and the willingness to trust and the courage to love your neighbor, the courage to love your enemy. If you acted as if God was love, if you believed that, and that would be manifest in your perceptions and your actions, that would invite the deity of love into existence. And that's true. You know that when you interact with people with love, and there's a tremendous courage in that, it makes the world a better place. And we don't know how deep that reaches. It certainly reaches as deep as humanity itself, and is there something transcendently real about it beyond that? Who knows? It's that's a far enough target for anyone, as far as I'm concerned. That was a hell of a question, Russell.